I used to not believe that there was unknown stuff in the woods. I thought maybe Bigfoot, maybe could be real, but I severely doubted it. After what I'm about to tell you happened, I know that there's something unknown out there. I just bought my first AR-15 style rifle. It was a Ruger AR-556, for anyone who cares, and bought a 60-round drum magazine for it at Gander Mountain while they were going out of business, because why the hell not? Reading up on the drum, I read that they were amazing and rarely had any issues at all. This would become important later. A few days after I got it, I finally decided to take it out for a test drive and sight in my gun a little better. Here's where everything went to shit. As I said, Kentucky is super wooded. 3/4 of the land I lived on was just thick woods. There was a main path for driving our buggy and a few small paths our cows had made in the woods. I decided to walk along our creek that had a small path half cleared out by our cows. At the end of the path is a big field our cows graze in and where I sight in guns when cows aren't there. As soon as I crossed the fence to go to the field, I instantly felt like I was being watched closely. I brushed it off because I've walked back there 1,000 times before and never been bothered by anything. So, I kept walking and ignored the feeling of being watched, but at the same time, I was aware of the feeling. I know I feel like I was being watched, but I wasn't giving it any noticeable attention. The walk to the field along the creek is a very short walk, maybe 2 minutes at a slow pace. The further I walked, the more intense the feeling got, like I was getting closer to whatever was watching me. About halfway there, the feelings got so intense I couldn't ignore it anymore. The drum magazine I had with me was unloaded, so I stopped and started loading it. I only brought 20 rounds with me because I was just going to sight in my gun, and 20 rounds should have been plenty. So I'm stopped, paying extremely close attention to what's going on around me, and loading my magazine. The exact moment I started putting rounds in the drum, I smell something dead, like it'd been dead for a while and rotting in the sun. I started looking around, and right behind me was what was left of a possum. It was torn to pieces. It was almost like it was placed there for me to find. The only thing was it looked like it'd been dead maybe a day at most, and what I was smelling seemed like it was far more decomposed. This obviously didn't set well with me, so I double timed it on the magazine loading. I guess I should have taken the dead possum as a last chance to turn around. I decided to keep going. I never had any problems back there before, so I assumed my brain was just being paranoid. I was almost to the field when I saw it. I was at the end of the creek, and the feeling of being watched was unbearable. Just as I was near the end of the creek and the edge of the woods, I heard a splash in the water. Being on edge, I immediately turned toward the noise, gun ready, but no round in the chamber. Walking down the creek away from me was something I'll never forget. This thing was at least 8 feet tall, maybe taller, very skinny. Imagine a grown man that weighs 120 pounds. Now stretch him out to be 8 feet tall, but his body width stays the same. Very long arms, and it walked on 2 legs. Skin stretched tightly across its body. It made no noise aside from the splash when it stepped in the creek while it walked. It also had a very weird walk, almost like a waddle, but taking large steps. But that could have been because it was on a muddy creek bank. It was also a light brown color, almost like the color of a deer. That's all I can remember about it now. Now I know why I felt like I was being watched. Magazine now loaded, bolt ready to send a round into the chamber. Remember what I said about the magazine being extremely reliable? So I pressed the bolt release on the gun to chamber a round just in case this monstrous thing decides to attack. I did not intend on striking first. The round gets stuck somehow and doesn't even budge out of the goddamn magazine. I'd never used that magazine before, so it didn't fail from heavy use. A bolt closing from a gun has enough force to break your finger. So why didn't this magazine work? My only guess is that the thing had something to do with it. The magazine never worked right again, and I had to return it. Needless to say, I didn't tell them what happened. I just told them the magazine failed several times. Anyway, back to the story. The gun jammed on the first round, which is usually the easiest. The thing books it out of there without running or making a noise. I had just long enough exposure to it to get the details I provided here. Now, for assumptions, it happened about late May last year. I still have the emails from the seller regarding the drum, so I'm using that as a reference because after this, I needed something reliable. As for what this creature was, me and a friend who knows more about this stuff than I do decided it could have been a damn Wendigo. The reason we think Wendigo is because everything I describe matches them near perfectly. I'd read that they were incredibly thin and tall, and have a stench of death that follows them everywhere. It explains the smell of the possum. They're very fast, can be several colors, light brown included, and that they sometimes violently kill other animals to scare humans. Again, the possum. The only thing that we couldn't come up with was its behavior. Why am I even still alive? Wendigos are supposed to be incredibly aggressive. Aside from watching me, it did nothing. Didn't try to attack or confront me. It ran from me like it was scared or trying to draw me where it wanted me. That being said, I've never had another encounter with it. I've gone to the same field, taking the same path, expecting to be watched, and have not gotten that feeling of being watched as strongly as that day. Something was out there, and you can't convince me otherwise. I've tried to trick myself into thinking I'm being watched out there, and still had no comparison to that day.